Reddit, have you ever saved someone's life? I just found out I apparently did. Waiting for the bus. Random guy wearing sunglasses also waiting for the bus leans over the curb to look to see if the bus is coming. Randomly collapses. So I run into the street where he collapsed and stop cars from running over him and ask him if he is okay. Call the cops. And turns out that he was a veteran and he got a blast from a grenade several tears ago. Has to take meds to help with his migraines. HR blacks out randomly TL. DR saved a veteran that blacks out randomly from getting ran over on a busy intersection. This July I was in an airport at the top of an escalator where a woman was trying to deal with her luggage. Baby in a stroller. And a toddler. Her toddler slipped right before they got on the escalator and without thinking she reached for him and, in doing so, let go of the baby stroller that was halfway onto the top stair of the escalator. The stroller started to tilt downward and when I realized it was about to completely tip over, I dropped my own luggage, grabbed it and brought it back up to the landing. No idea if I actually saved the kid's life. The escalator was empty, so I imagine it would have fallen all the way down. This is why there are all those signs that say don't take strollers on escalators. The Red Cross tells me I save 4 lives every time I give blood. So apparently I've saved somewhere around 24 lives. Not me. But a friend of mine gave the Heimlich to a buddy in the middle of a Taco Bell after he tried to deep throat a burrito. This is beyond touching. Not me, but my dad has 13 documented saves. He is a master rigger and 13 people were saved by reserve chutes he packed. I indirectly saved a woman's life after she wandered into my store and began stumbling around. At first I thought she was just drunk, mumbling to herself. But I made out 3 words. Insulin. Blood sugar. Before she completely crashed headfirst into the candy racks. I called the EMTs and they showed up in about 3 minutes. Gave her a shot of something to stabilize her, then carted her off to the hospital. One of the cops who responded to the initial call came by later that day to tell me if I hadn't heard the insulin part and alerted the EMTs to it, she could have gone into severe shock and died. Not me. But my ex-GF had something similar happen. She was a breakfast regular at a restaurant. And made a point to talk to one server on a regular basis. Ask him how he was doing, etc. One morning he wasn't her server. But she made an effort to talk to him anyway. And didn't think anything of it. About a year later he was leaving for another job and waited for her to come in so he could say goodbye. He then thanked her for talking to him that particular day. Because he was planning to kill himself after work and he realized she'd actually be sad if that happened and so he didn't do it. It's stories like these that make me realize that people can go about their everyday life and not realize the impact they have on someone's life. I saved my mother's life a few years ago. We were in a bad car crash. She broke 16 bones and punctured a lung. I secured her head so she could breathe more easily. She was being suffocated by the steering wheel, and I managed to stop most of the bleeding from her right leg, open femur fracture. It felt like years before the ambulance came. And my now fiancé was in the backseat with a broken back. I talked him out of crawling through a broken window and calmed him down, which is no small achievement if you know him. The paramedics visited me in the hospital the day after, telling me what difference I made. It made a really horrible situation a small bit better. My sister has. She was walking to class and she passed a kid sitting in his car looking to be asleep, but he didn't look okay. She tapped on the window, but no response. She called 911. Once the cops and an ambulance arrived, she had to get to class. The cop who first reported to the scene called to tell her that the kid had OD'd and would have died if she hadn't called them when she did. She's awesome and my hero. Not just for her actions on that day, but she is a social worker and does amazing things every day. Good work. It's a great feeling. I pulled a guy out of a burning trailer once. He was burned badly and I wound up covered in his blood and skin. Not fun for the hour drive home to change clothes. I also spotted a pretty large shark cruising in the waves down the beach one day and got a lady out of its path. I don't know if it would have killed or even attacked her, but better to not find out. I noticed the signs of a concussion in a friend's wife who had fallen down and forced her to go to the hospital. Dr. said if she hadn't received treatment she might have died. When I read the first one, I read, I talked a guy out of buying a trailer once. Chugging wine with some friends at a lake years ago. Watching a kid swim out too far, then not seeing him anymore. As realization set in, my friend ran out there first, dove into the water, and I was about 45 seconds behind. I hesitated. We both swam out to the center of the lake and he pulled the kid up. I swam alongside him, helping him drag the kid back to shore. The kid's family watched as my friend pumped his chest, choked on water and came back. It was a Mother's Day I never forget. The family didn't even thank us. Should have offered to throw him back then. I was a lifeguard and pulled a 2-year-old off the bottom of a 12-foot well. I guess that counts. A person is a person, no matter how small. To be clear, a well is slang for the deep diving area under a diving board at a pool. I guess it isn't called that everywhere. Was really into Parker during my college years in Virginia Tech. Talked a lot about it to my friends. Used to show off at every chance I got. One of my friends happened to be in one of the classrooms on the 16th of April, 2007. Head gunshots. And jumping out the window 2 stories up. Broke his leg, but lived. Later on he told me that he did it because he asked himself, what would I do in that situation? And it seemed like the obvious choice. I was skateboarding home from my university 2 years ago and I thought I saw a woman struggling to push her car into a parking lot. Thought it had died on her. Had a small internal conflict whether to help or not. Decided to stop and ask if she needed help. Turns out she was choking. 7 seconds later I saved her life. Kind of. When I was 11, I was standing in the entryway of my friend's house waiting for her to leave with me, as her toddler-age brother played on the 2nd floor banister above me. She had a big house, and the ledge that her brother was dangling his various limbs from was very high up. Literally out of nowhere, I see a large mass falling from my peripheral vision. I dove towards it at the last second as I realized that it was her brother falling. I ended up with whiplash from him landing on my neck and knocking me down. And he was screaming and crying for about an hour. But at least he didn't meet the wood floor head first. He is 13 now and occasionally tells this story. So I always donated blood but never thought about it. One day I got a call from the blood bank. They invited me to a special event to meet a little girl whom I and a few others' blood went into during a transfusion for this girl. That was a great experience and she was presented with a shirt with our names on it of who helped save her. Sometimes when I feel down, I try to remember, hey, I'm not that bad of a person to someone. I am a name on her shirt. I am honestly proud I have. I've saved many lives. In my spare time, I admin an advice blog for people with mental illness, self-harm issues or suicidal thoughts. I couldn't even try to count the individual times I've stopped someone from committing suicide or succeeding in their attempt. But one occasion always sticks out. I was talking to this girl from Germany who had just attempted and was bleeding profusely for a while. By the time I rang her, she wasn't able to stand up. She could just talk and was able to call the ambulance before passing out about 2 minutes later. She told me about a week later that my advice and help saved her life beyond a shadow of a doubt. I can't deny it. Saving someone's life is the best feeling in the world. So yeah, that's my little story of how I saved someone's life. I'm on my phone so I'll keep it quick. Walking back from work fairly late at night, age 16. Learning about the bystander effect at college. See 3 guys beating a small guy with bats. Puffed myself up. Took action and charged. Guy suffered from brain damage and was put in an induced coma. Police told me one more hit to the head and he was a dead man. They took everything of his at night. Went from a bank worker to full-time McDonald's employee. Did feel slow motion dive to a friend that stepped out in front of a car after contemplating suicide. Found my girlfriend's friend passed out and choking on her own sick at a TTY party. Stomach pump. I turned 20 this December. The night I scared the muges off and I got taken home by the police was the only night I have seen my mother proud of me in my whole life. I hung out with this girl who I had the biggest crush on for years. Turns out she was super depressed and I just listened to her story and pet her head. We've hung out nearly every day since then. Turns out she had attempted suicide twice. Once she almost succeeded and the other time I think it was just a cry for help suicide attempt. Anyway. She had serious plans for another real one because nobody would just listen and give a shit. It's amazing what a little compassion or humanity or whatever you wanna call it can do for someone who's hurting. We went to pick a photo that we had developed and framed for our friends that were graduating during lunchtime. I was in the backseat passenger side. My buddy A was driving. And D was in the front seat. We had just gotten our year's books so we were exchanging them. I was like D. Put your seatbelt on, I don't want to me. Yo A. Pull over until she puts her seatbelt on. I don't care if we are late. She huffs and puffs but she complies. 30 seconds later a car drives out in front of us. We hit T-bone him going 45 miles per hour. Can't be for sure if I saved her life but I saved her from more serious injuries. Technically you wouldn't have been there when the car T-boned you if you hadn't stopped to put on a seatbelt. However, I'm sure your friend won't ever forget her seatbelt again. So I would count it a win. I saved 2 lives. About 5 years ago, I performed the Heimlich maneuver on my wife. About 34 years ago, I quit drinking, saving my own life. Okay. I was at my grandparents' house, just chilling with my cousins. One being 4, the other 12. We went outside on the porch for a while. 12-year-old, let's call her H, and I went in to grab something to drink. When we came back out, the 4-year-old, let's call him B, had ran into a narrow street right next to a larger one. Old man drove around the corner and since B was so small, the man couldn't see him over the hood of his car. I sprinted into the street, grabbed B, and over into the grass. H ran into the house yelling RK just saved B's life. Feels were had. I saved my father's life 4 years ago when he had his second heart attack. I was on work placement in an ER. I'm a 4th year medical student. A patient came in complaining of chest pain. While myself and one of the doctors were talking to her she had a cardiac arrest. The doctor hadn't noticed as he was filling out her chart. I shouted at him and hit the emergency alarm. She came back after about 15 minutes of CPR and 2 defibrillations. I was told afterwards by the 2 nurses and the attending supervising me that if it wasn't for me that patient was dead. I did the Heimlich on my 3-year-old cousin when I was babysitting. I was peeling an orange for her and her siblings and when I wasn't looking she rolled the peel up into a ball and tried swallowing it. She started slamming her hand on the table and jumping and I panicked and slapped her back at first but then I came to my senses actually did the Heimlich. I was scared. She was all fine after but I was like shaking. My girlfriend was a victim of severe depression. She had always wanted to play tenors in our high school band. I play snare. And I am the captain. She decided that she would play that season and realize her dream. Then she would kill herself. Not knowing this, I started talking to this girl. We got very close. And at the end of the season she gave me a note. I won't disclose the details of the note. But she revealed her plans. She said she should be writing a suicide note. But she's writing a thank you note instead. She told me I gave her a reason to live. She gave me a purpose. I called the police to get a friend of mine that was about to attempt suicide. They're doing okay now, my friend. I don't know about the police. I did. Right after almost killing him. When I was a lad, like kindergarten 4th grade. Me and some friends would hang out with this curmudgeonly old neighbor man who lived next door and bought us Pizza Hut and gave us candy out of the white Bratches mix bags. At some point he moved into an apartment a few blocks away where we would visit him and take advantage of the pool there when the weather was nice. He would watch us down at the pool, but would just fall asleep in a chair as often as not. I was the oldest and the most capable swimmer. I was hanging out in the deep end like the big-dicked moth-efker I am, when I felt my leg being tugged on. It doesn't occur to me that my friend cannot yet swim and I assume that he's just horsing around. So I obviously wrap my legs around his head and hold him underwater. After a few obliviously murderous seconds I had the epiphany that he couldn't swim and was probably seeking help instead of someone to accelerate the drowning process. So I swam down and pulled him up. Holy shit, man. That's astounding. Kinda puts into perspective how the tiniest act can manifest so enormously. Also questions how our actions on Reddit affect others. Doesn't it? It's still hitting me. Had I not accepted his invitation? Had I not had the conversations we had? Had I not listened and given advice the way I did? If I had not, there would be 2 little girls with 1 less father in the world. I saved my brother's life once, to be fair. I was in the Navy working on E-2C Hawkeyes. I did a turnaround inspection on one of the aircraft. Upon inspecting the brakes, I found a pinhole of light shining through the discs. I wrote this on my report. Several airframers came out and looked at the brakes and said the brakes were fine. The maintenance chief sat me down and asked me if I was sure of what I saw. I told I wasn't going to change the report. They towed the aircraft into the hangar, jacked it up and took the main mount wheel off. When they loosened the brakes, one of the discs fell to the ground into hundreds of pieces. I was credited with saving the aircrew who were scheduled to take the next flight in that aircraft. I was given a Safety Pro of the Month award, along with a plaque and 72 hours liberty. Hey man, stay away from the edge of that cliff. And he did. What a hero. I didn't. But my little brother, inadvertently, did. My mother was scheduled to go on a helicopter trip in the Arctic to look at polar bears or something. Ended up not being able to go because my little bro was born a few weeks early. There was a storm, and the helicopter crashed, killing 3, I think, people. The only reason my mother wasn't on the helicopter was because my lil bro decided that he wanted out early. I guess he saved his own life too. Technically. TL. Dr. Mom didn't go on helicopter because she gave birth a few weeks in advance. I realize there are many comments, and I know OP won't see this, but I just want to say, people like this inspire me. I'm doing my best helping friends through tough times. Talking to people. And that's all there is to it. Just talk to people. Understand? I saved someone at Asu said you from killing themselves. Also, this was on another account. Still, I can't shake the image of a newspaper headline reading Volcano Penis Prevents Potential Suicide. My life is a lie. I was talking in passing with some fellow students before a graduate class and someone mentioned his brother was really depressed. I told them about how I have a history of depression suicidal thoughts but I ultimately got over them by simply thinking that if I killed myself then there would be no benefits to anyone else. I found out a few semesters later that the guy told his brother what I said and it was enough for the brother to start to turn his life around. It was not profound but was just the right thing to keep him from doing something terrible. TL. Dr. Classmate told his brother how I beat depression which convinced him to not kill himself. Second story. Not me but my father saved a man from drowning. While in Hawaii for a soccer tournament my dad was at the beach and saw a guy drowning in rough waves. There wasn't a lifeguard around so he swam out and brought the guy back to shore and gave him mouth to mouth. He never mentions this and if it comes up he simply says, "Someone had to do it so it is nothing to praise." Humble man. Revived my cat. She didn't breathe after falling. I prevented a 13-year-old girl from committing suicide. I met her on Omegle. Cheered her up. And haven't spoken to her since. I saved her life and rode off into the sunset on her escape key.